So my name is Jill Strominger, and I am the Communications Director for New Music USA. Today, I'm joined by my colleagues Tyler Keene, Monisha Chaudhary, and Alana Maharaj Stone. Closed captioning and ASL interpretation are being provided today, and we are going to post this recording and the PowerPoint slides on our website after this presentation so that everyone can access them on their own time as well. We are also going to host another webinar on July 29th at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And so we'll be sending that information out soon. For those of you who are new to our organization, New Music USA is a 501c3 nonprofit that supports the creation of new music in the US by providing artists with funding support, resources, and community. We are proud to be a partner organization for the City Artists Corps Grants Program, which is a $25 million recovery initiative designed to help artists who are both hard hit by the pandemic and who may have been left out of other local and federal funding opportunities. The program is administered by the New York Foundation for the Arts in partnership with the New York City Department of Cultural Affairs and the Queen's Theater, with support from the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment. We have a lot to get through today, so I'm going to dive in here in a couple minutes. We are going to first share our agenda and let you know that after each section of information we present, we are going to leave some space for questions. We are also going to leave some time for questions at the end. As we're going through our presentation, please feel free to use the chat to post any questions that come up, and my colleague Alana will be watching that and making sure to flag some questions to us. And Alana will also be taking notes today on questions that are asked so that if there's anything that we can't answer during this presentation, we can find the answer and get it back to you. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and dive in, if you don't mind. Tyler is taking us to the overview. So today we're going to cover the eligibility, public engagement activity, criteria for awarding grants, information around the actual funds. We're going to discuss the timeline and deadlines, and then completing the application. And again, we're going to leave some time after each of these sections for questions, and then questions at the end as well. So, City Artists Corps grants are intended to support New York City-based working artists who have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. Grants of $5,000 to more than 3,000 artists will be distributed, which is $15 million into the pockets of New York City artists. This funding comes from federal stimulus money to help New York City recover from the pandemic. The grants are to help artists sustain their practice and engage the public across New York City's 5 boroughs between July and October. Now we're going to get into the eligibility. Applicants must live in New York City, be 21 or older as of June 8th, 2021. They must have a social security number, an individual taxpayer identification number, or an employee identification number, and they must be a practicing artist. Let's now take these one by one. You must live in the 5 boroughs of New York City, and you must have maintained residency in New York City since at least January 2020. So if you moved to New York after January 2020, or you moved away and came back, unfortunately, you are not eligible. To prove that you are a New York City resident, you will need to find official documentation that states your name and your New York City address. And this documentation must be from October, November, or December of 2020. Some examples include utility bills, bank statements or bills, credit card statements, residential leases, roommate agreements, rent receipts or proof of rent, studio leases, valid government IDs, or other form of official documentation, as long as it is dated October, November, or December 2020, and has your full name and address in New York City on them. You must be 21 or older as of June 8th, 2021. To prove this, you will have to provide proof such as a US passport, New York State driver's license, an ID NYC, or another state issued ID that includes your birth date. And you must have a social security number, individual taxpayer identification number, or employee identification number. You will not be asked to provide this with your application, but you will have to provide it if you are awarded the grant. And finally, you must be an artist with a sustained, ongoing commitment to your creative practice and be able to demonstrate that, which I will go into more details around in a moment. So artists in all disciplines are eligible, including these disciplines. Craft and textile artists, including those working in ceramics, glass, wood, metal, fiber, and mixed media, all forms of dance and choreography, community arts, design and architecture, including environmental and functional design, digital and electronic arts, folk and traditional arts, interdisciplinary work, literary arts, including fiction, nonfiction, poetry, playwriting, and screenwriting, music and sound works, including musicians and composers working in any and all styles of music, theater and performance, including directing, live action and puppetry, video and film of all forms, and visual arts, including painting, photography, printmaking, drawing, and sculpture. Grantees can work with other artists or collaboratives or organizations on your project, but funds are only awarded to individual artists. So when you're applying, you should only apply as an individual, not on behalf of a collective. To demonstrate that you are an artist with an active practice, you will provide documentation of your creative practice from 2019, 2020, or 2021. This kind of evidence can be a work sample, such as slides of visual art you've made, publication of a literary work you wrote, or it could be a program from a performance or exhibition. It could be a news item or a press release or even press coverage. And if you don't have those, it could also be a letter from a producer, a presenter, director, or a curator that you worked with. And this letter must state the project that you took part in. And it also needs to have the date that it is 2019, 2020, or 2021. That date has to be on the work sample, or else the work sample will be ineligible for consideration. In addition, you also need to provide a resume, CV, or brief bio that describes your artistic work. And this also needs to be from 2019, 2020, or 2021. Applicants cannot be enrolled in a degree-seeking program. Another thing to note is that culture workers, such as stage managers, art handlers, curators, and others are not eligible for this grant. However, if a cultural worker has their own artistic practice outside of their professional work, they are eligible to apply as long as they can provide documentation of their personal practice and demonstrate that they are an active artist. Employees of the City of New York, NYFA, or any partnering organization supporting the City Artist Corps program and their board members and immediate family members are not eligible either. So to quickly recap, if you live in New York City, you're 21 or older, as of June 8th, 2021, you have one of the essential ID numbers that we've provided on this slide, or you are an artist with an ongoing creative practice, and you are an artist with an ongoing creative practice, you are eligible to apply. So I will pause to see if we have any questions about eligibility. All right. Let's see. We got a question: when providing evidence of recent artistic work with a CV or resume, if the artist is intending to work with a collective, will the panelists prefer to see work of the artist working with said collective, or will they only focus on the artistic merit of the individual artist and what materials of the individual artist's work? Based on my understanding, it only needs to be the individual artist's work. But we can definitely double check that and let you know if there's anything that states otherwise. But based on our interpretation, it only needs to be the individual artist's work, not that of the collective. Great. So now I'm going to move into the public engagement requirement aspect of this. Let's see. Oh, we got one more question here. When you say the CV or resume needs to be from 2019, 2020, or 2021, does the applicant only need to include entries on the CV resume from that year they've chosen to highlight? From what I understand, as long as the resume or CV shows active work from those dates, then it is eligible to be submitted. If you have any specific questions about your documentation, let us know and we'll be happy to take a look at that. Thank you.
Yeah,
right,
and sorry to jump in.
Please
We're
do.
going to go over the criteria upon which NYFA and the partner organizations are going to go through applications. So some of these we'll definitely address in a moment.
Thank you. All right. And so now we're going to talk about the public engagement requirement for the funding. So it must have an arts or creative focus. You must propose an activity that engages with the public. It must occur in New York City and any of the 5 boroughs of the city. It must happen before October 31st, 2021. And a live event is strongly encouraged. However, artists with disabilities and those who are immunosuppressed for whom it is unsafe to engage in live in-person performance, we are all welcome to apply for live online activity that will still engage the public. The event must be indoors or outdoors, and it must be free. However, it can be ticketed for safety reasons or to accommodate spatial concerns. A broad range of creative engagement activities are possible. So this can be live performance, such as a concert, play, reading, recital, etc. Can be a public screening of a film or other media work. It can be an art exhibit in a community center or other public or private venue, including apartment gallery setups. It can be a live art making experience, such as a painting of a mural. It can be a workshop, an artist talk, a demonstration, or even a studio tour. There really are no limits as to what form this can take. So the takeaway here is that it doesn't have to be elaborate or expensive. It just has to meet the requirements that we're telling you about today. Your public engagement activity can be a part of an established or recurring program that's already planned, can be a part of an existing festival or program, or it can be a completely new event that you will schedule independently. More than one artist can apply for the same project. So if you and a partner each apply, you might both get the grant. However, of course, if only one of you applies, then maybe only one of you will get it. So it's encouraged for more artists to apply for the same project. And your project can involve other artists. And so again, just make sure that you're applying just as an individual, but different individuals can apply as part of the same project. Creative engagements do not need to feature new work. It can be a restaging, a showing, reading, screening, or demonstration of work that you have previously created. It does not need to be a final production or completed work. It's okay if you state time and place to be determined when you're applying, and resources will be provided to help you find a venue or obtain a permit. You still would have to do the work of securing those things, but the partner organizations can provide assistance and some resources to help you with those things. If you do get the grant, the required documentation will be a final report that's simple and includes 2 photographs from your public engagement activity. All right, so now I'll just pause to see if there are any questions about that. All right, great. I'm going to hand it over to Tyler, and we'll be keeping an eye out for questions as they come in too. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Tyler. I'm a digital associate here at New Music USA, and we can talk very quickly about the criteria upon which NYFA and the partner organizations are evaluating applications. So the first 2 cycles, we're within the second cycle right now. This is being handled by NYFA right now. And it is a weighted lottery prioritizing New York City's hardest hit zip codes, annual household income, and an applicant's disability status. So essentially what they're going to do is list everybody's names. They are going to assign a weight to each applicant depending on priorities, including zip codes and household income and disability status, with real data kind of driving the decision as to how much priority we give those applicants. And then based on those weights, they'll go through and choose applicants. Now in the third cycle, which will be in about 2 weeks from now, all of the partner organizations are creating a different tool that is going to essentially do the same thing, but take into account more criteria. Those criteria include the original 3, which are zip code, disability status, and annual household income. But we're also going to include criteria such as race and ethnicity, gender identity, sexuality, country of origin and language, and the artistic discipline with which somebody is applying. The goal with that is to fill in the cracks of any communities that are either under or overrepresented with the first 2 cycles, to make sure that there's equitable access for everybody to these grants. You will not be evaluated on your artistic merit or achievement. And this is with respect to our question about resumes and CVs. That's there to prove that you have been involved in New York's art community, but it's the quality of those works is not what's getting judged here. This is effectively need-based funding. This is relief funding. You will not be evaluated on the quality or the originality of the proposed creative engagement activity either. Again, that's not one of the criteria which we'll be considering. The goal is to help artists through relief. Are there any questions? I see some questions flowing in. Okay, I'll go through these quickly. Actually, our colleague Alana is answering these right now. So if you've asked a question, yeah, she'll be able to help you. Okay, the money, this is the fun part. So the grant is of $5,000 total, and we will be distributing these to more than 3,000 artists, which makes up $15 million worth of aid, which is really quite remarkable. It's a very big program. And if you are awarded, you will get $4,000 upfront upon onboarding with the grant program. And then whenever you submit your final report, including photos and so forth, then you will get the final $1,000. You do not have to provide a project budget, and you do not have to report how you've spent the funds. And this is important. This is relief funding. You can spend as much of this on the project which you apply with as much as you'd like. You can also spend this on rent. You can also spend this on groceries. This is relief funding, and it is there to help you and to help rekindle New York's public art scene. Again, you can spend the money in any way you wish. You can spend it on your public engagement project, but you do not have to. So that is entirely up to the demands of your own project. And, yeah, really, you can use this for your own well-being as well. So are there any additional questions about the money? I'm sorry. Okay, then I will pass the mic to my colleague Monisha, and we'll talk about the timeline.
Hi, I'm Monisha Chaudhary, and I'm the grant making manager here at New Music USA. So yes, I'll be talking about timeline. We've passed our, we have 3 cycles, and we've passed our first cycle, so we don't really need to go over that. But we're in cycle 2 at this moment. And cycle 2 had opened on July 6th, and it will be ending this Tuesday, July 20th at 10 a.m., of course, Eastern time. And notifications will go out whether you've been awarded or you've been rejected for, or you're ineligible, August 2nd. And your engagements must be between August 20th to October 31st. All engagements must be before, by October 31st. So if you miss this cycle, there's cycle 3. And that is starting on July 27th. That's when the applications will be open again. And it'll start at 10 a.m. and end on August 10th at 10 a.m. And notifications will be out August 25th, and engagements must be between September 3rd and October 31st. Eligible applicants not awarded a grant and whose proposed projects are flexible or eligible for the next cycle will automatically be included in the next cycle. So if your project, if you weren't awarded cycle 2 and you're an eligible applicant, your application will be passed to cycle 3 and then vetted from there. But again, the engagement needs to be between those timelines that I just spoke about, and they all must happen before October 31st. So the next deadline I want to talk about is the final report. It's due November 21st. And again, as my colleague said, it's supposed to be super simple, super easy. It should be including 2 photos of the engagement activity and the number of audience members you had. Yeah, and they've kept it really simple on purpose. And that's when you submit the final report, that's when you'll get the last installment of the grant, which is the 1,000. So you'll get 4,000 once you've been awarded the grant, and then 1,000 after you've submitted your final report. So are there any questions about timelines or deadlines? All right, we can go ahead to the next to application. So talk about the application. So that is going to be on Submittable. You can apply online, and there's a direct link from the NYFA website, and also on our PDF, PDF, and we have links everywhere to go to Submittable. The application is a free account, so there's nothing that you have to pay. Before you begin your application, gather your information. If you do miss this cycle and you want to prep for cycle 3, the application won't be open, but you'll know to gather proof of New York City residence, age, like we said, CV, documentation of your creative process, your proposed public engagement activity. Make sure you do have computer, internet access, email address, also the ability to upload documents. You can have a friend or a family member or someone to help apply for you on your behalf. And you need to complete the application will take less than 1 hour to complete. So it's super simple and super easy. And if you need to take a break from it, it saves automatically and you can finish it later. So that's that about the application. There are some things that you should note that NYFA has seen problematic in applications that they've received. There have been missing work samples. There have been broken URL links, so make sure you don't have any of those. Sometimes the CV or the bio does not include the list of artistic practice accomplishments, so make sure you include those. Sometimes an applicant hasn't shown activity between dates of 2019 to 2021. So that's that. Also, they've seen issues with people showing proof of residency in New York City. So make sure you have that all squared away. Also, age was another issue that came up. And also, lastly, there was vague outlines of the project. They weren't clear whether the project was happening inside New York City, outside of New York City. So, your project doesn't have to be super elaborate, but please, when you, describe your project, have it super clear. So just any questions on the application? So I have one question here. It says here in the submittable grant application, it indicates that if the time date of your expected project is either projected after September 2nd or is flexible, or it would be considered in cycle 3. Does this mean it would not be considered for cycle 2? No, it's going to be considered for cycle 2. And then if it doesn't make it within that, what's it, in that vetting, it will be pushed to the next cycle. So that's the answer. So no, your application will still be in the running. Okay, so we'll have language services. So we have it in Spanish, simplified Chinese, traditional Chinese. So the applications can be submitted in these languages. And there are further resources if you need some translation. We have Arabic, Bengali, French, Haitian, Creole, Hindi, Korean, Polish, Russian, and Urdu. So other partner organizations will be also hosting tech assistance. So please check out the NYFA's tech assistance schedule. And if you need further assistance from us, you may email us at communications@newmusicusa.org. So yeah, again, any questions about completing the application?
For those of you who are typing the questions, we're doing our best to answer them on the back end too. And so if your question doesn't get answered here today, if we're not able to get the answer to you, then we'll find that answer and we'll post it on our website. I'm going to include in the chat some links that are going to be helpful. This is a link to the NYFA page that has the application and translation services and things like that. And then I'm also going to include a link to our webpage as well. Thank you so much. So we have quite a few questions here that are coming in. And so as we're answering them here, I think it might help everyone because I don't think everyone can see these questions. I'm just going to state them live and then we'll answer them so that everyone can hear these questions. So one of the questions that we received is, do the engagements have to be within the New York City boroughs? And the answer is yes. These do have to take place in any of the 5 boroughs. We also got a question here from a composer. Hypothetically, if their project is to write a new work for a solo violin and then with a violinist go around to various open air New York City landmarks and give a performance of it. I think the question is if that qualifies as a public engagement. And my understanding is that that is a yes. I'll look to my colleagues. Looks like they understand that to be true as well. There are some permitting things to be aware of in certain live New York City situations. And again, all the partner organizations are going to have the resources to help you with that. So if you do get the grant and there is a permit requirement along with your planned performance, we'll be there to help you with that.
Also want to just add that you might want to add the timeline of getting a permit into when you project to have your public engagement. New York City parks, for example, takes 21 days to get your permit. So just putting that out there.
And I'd also like to jump in and say that for composers particularly, I would come up with a way in which you're also being very active with this public performance. And the definition of what a public performance is very flexible. So if you wanted to have an open discussion about your work in addition to this performance, that would be an excellent way in which both you and the violinist, or in any case, you as a composer and performers, can both be eligible for this grant, since both of you will be involved in the, I guess, production of the project.
Great, and we got a couple other questions here. So one is about work samples. So of course, since many artists working in live performance couldn't perform for most of 2020 and the start of 21, can scores or scripts written during that time count as valid work samples, even if they were not yet produced and presented? Again, any work samples have to have a date on them. So I think as long as you can prove that these were worked on during that time, during those essential dates, then they would count as work samples. I'm going to look to my colleagues here to see what they think.
Yeah, the goal is just to ensure that you were active during that period. Again, this is not to vet, this isn't based upon a person's merit and, of the the circumstances of those works during that period. They just want to make sure that you were still active. So ideally, I would lean towards a project or a work sample which was able to be realized, but obviously that hasn't been always feasible during the pandemic. So that should still be valid.
Thank you, Tyler. And we got another question asking if it's okay to submit a range of project possibilities in the application with the stipulation that one of them would be executed if the grant was awarded, since there's a lot of things in flux right now. From my understanding, you can only propose one project idea. So just one project that you would apply for. But again, there's a lot of flexibility in what this project can be. And if you are awarded the grant and you decide that the grant is going to be completely, you're going to use the grant for a completely different project than you originally intended, then that's a conversation you can have with NYFA. And as long as it meets the requirements for the funding, I don't see why that would be a problem.
Yeah, sorry to hop in so much, but NYFA, if you're awarded the grant, you will, during the onboarding process, they will ask you a second time what your proposal is. And when this can be a completely different project. So the project which you propose isn't set in stone. The goal is just to make sure that you are doing a project that is still within the guidelines of the application. And in this scenario that like you're doing something so fundamentally different, I would just email NYFA directly. On their website, there are contact links through which you can talk to NYFA. So if you have questions, if you want to like withdraw your application and send another application in, you can do that. But in general, it's quite flexible. This is really about relief and less so about merit.
Thank you. We got some other questions. One is if a proposed album release in 2021 count, would that count as work? As long as there's a public engagement component of that and that it's going to take place in New York City and it's going to be free and it's going to happen by October 31st, 2021. As long as that's a component of what you're proposing, then that would be considered. But just an album release without those things would not. we also got a question about if a sample needs to be from all of the years 2019 to 2021. It just has to be one sample from those years. And we also got a question about the reference that's required. And just this person is just looking for some more information about what they are looking to see from that reference. Tyler or Manisha, do you mind taking that one?
Yeah, I can happily. So that is just to make sure that you are an active artist. So, you know, the point of that reference is just to prove that you are active in the New York's arts community if you don't have any of those other types of documents to, you know, kind of prove that. So that is just kind of an open-ended way of proving through. They're not looking for anything specific other than the word of another person that you are in fact an active New York City artist.
Thank you. And there was a clarification on one of the other questions. It was actually about a work sample, not the proposed project. And so I think that I'll need to have more information, but what I'm understanding is that this is an album release that happened in 2021 or is planned for 2021. And if that would count as a work sample, and again, as long as it meets the requirements of having that date, and then yeah, that would count. We got one question that is just asking 2021 or 2022. So I think there's some confusion around one of the dates we provided. So if whoever asked that question could just type what date exactly or what item they're referring to, that would help us answer that question. Thank you. Okay. Great. And then there are a couple folks here who have some more questions. Here's a question about work that was performed virtually. How do we prove the date, time? And the question is, would a Facebook Live link work? And I think that would be great because that would have that information on there. So that would be a good proof point. Or if there's any kind of news item or press around those kinds of events that you could take a screen grab of, I think that would count too. Okay, and I think that does it for the questions that we've received. Please let us know if there are any more questions at all. And again, we're going to put our email address in the chat so that you can reach out to us directly with any additional questions. And we're also including some really helpful links in the chat too that you can reference. We just got one in asking if an artist has to interface with a partnering organization, and no, that is not part of the requirement at all.
Oh, and it seems that the question 2021 or 2022 was asking if the project has to be completed by October of 2021 or 2022. This has to be done by October of 2021. So you have about 3 months between your hopeful award of the project and the actual deadline to complete the project.
As I mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, we're going to be sharing this recording and also sharing the slides so that everyone can access this information on their own. I'm also going to include some helpful links in the chat, and please reach out to us at communications@newmusic.org with any questions you had that did not get answered today, or any questions that come up as you're looking at the application, hopefully over this weekend, because the cycle 2 application deadline is Tuesday, July 20th at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We will have another webinar on July 29th at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time that will align with cycle 3 applications. And so we'll be here to answer your questions then as well. But please reach out if anything comes up in the meantime. I'll give one more pause to see if we have any more questions coming in from the folks here today. All right. I think we're all set. Thank you to everyone who has come today. Please share this webinar and these resources with your networks. We hope that as many people as possible learn about this grant program and apply to it. Again, please reach out with any questions, and we look forward to seeing you all very soon. Hope that you have a wonderful weekend.